I would like to introduce our presenter this morning. Dr. Calvin R. Trent is a lifelong Detroiter who has always been committed to his family, his community, and those suffering from addiction and mental health issues. He holds a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology, a Master's of Education from Wayne State University, and a PhD in Clinical Psychology from the University of Detroit Mercy, where his dissertation research examined the relationship of substance abuse treatment and psychosocial development among Black and white adult males. Dr. Trent was appointed in March 2009 by Mayor Kenneth Cockrell as Director and Public Health Officer for the City of Detroit Department of Health and Wellness Promotion. He served in that position for 1 year before returning to his general manager position. For the previous 12 years, Dr. Trent had served in the health department as general manager of the Special Populations Health Services, and before that as director of the Bureau of Substance Abuse Prevention, Treatment, and Recovery. He retired from government service in August 2011. Dr. Trent is a strong advocate for modernizing the manner in which citizens suffering from the disease of addiction are viewed and treated by healthcare systems and the community in general. He has been a visionary in supporting and implementing new systems of behavioral health care that promote recovery and has been central in the development of programs such as Treatment on Demand, Project Fresh Start, Project Helping Hands, the Detroit Recovery Project, Detroit Returning Citizens Center, Project FAIR, Families Achieving Independence Through Recovery, Citywide Faith Conference on Addiction and HIV, and most recently, expanded recovery supports that include drug-free housing for those leaving treatment. He is a national and international leading advocate of the recovery-oriented system of care transformation. He's currently working for Great Lakes Addiction Technology Transfer Center as the team leader in Tanzania, East Africa, as the country seeks to address its growing drug epidemic through implementing the ROSC model. Since retirement from city service, Dr. Trent continues to be active in supporting substance abuse prevention, treatment, and recovery, and has founded Real PAC Michigan, which is a political action committee with the mission of promoting increased political support for the recovery community. Please join me this morning in giving a warm welcome to Dr. Calvin Trent.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I didn't know I had did all them things. How's everybody this morning? Good. Well, I get to stand up here. That light is mighty bright, but somebody told me we have a disco ball up there. So just in case the presentation is really boring, we can we can disco a little bit in here and warm it up. I'm really glad to be here. I mean, the world is great this morning. I was kind of worried that if the Tigers did their usual thing last night, that I would be all upset today, but they actually won. So we're 2-2. The world things are good. Now we got to wait for the Lions. We have co-occurring disorders in our sports teams here, and there's a lot of stress going on. But today, I've done this event. I love this. Isn't this a great center? It's a beautiful place. I've done this series, I think 3 times now, so this is third time, so I'm an old pro at it. And but we've got so many changes going on in our system. Hey. And it's so many good friends that I see in the audience. Everybody asks me, how's retirement? I'm like, retirement is not all it's cracked up to be. I guess some people travel well and have organized things they do when they wake up in the morning and they're retired. When I'm retired and I wake up in the morning, it's like, I don't have anything to do, which is not what I want to be about. So today, we're going to be talking for a while about addressing co-occurring disorders with youth. And, I really wanted to make it more than that. One of the things is that in many ways you guys are really the experts. So you're going to say, well, what does he know about the kids? I'm dealing with them every day. He's retired. But there are so many important things going on around us, and our ability to provide the service for the youth and for their families and for members of our community. And so I wanted to frame this presentation also in the context of what's going to be going on for you guys, both as workers and as members of agencies in Wayne County in the next year. You know, because a lot of things are happening and a lot of changes are happening. You know, we got an authority. It started October. And guess what? I think we have an Affordable Care Act. Well, I'm never quite sure, you know, but whether you like them or not, they're here. And there's good things and maybe there's not so good things, but we need to be prepared to know how we're going to be able to continue to provide the services, the greatly needed services that we provide in the community in light of these changes. So I did title, in this new paradigm for mental health and substance abuse intervention, with two subtitles, one called Recovery-Oriented Systems of Care, which is something you need to be very aware of in terms of how we'll be providing services. And then the Affordable Care Act, which is going to hopefully give the opportunity for many of our clients to get services that they haven't been able to get before. So that's so the presentation is really going to be broken up in three parts. One talking about youth with co-occurring disorders, and then talking about recovery-oriented systems of care, and then talking about the Affordable Care Act. And the good thing is you're going to get credits for this. It's going to be long, you know, but hopefully, and I even if I can't cover all the material, I put material, your PowerPoint should direct you to things that you can look at later. It's going to be really important. Hopefully we'll have a question and answer period along the way or after. I turned off my phone, so guys, make sure your phone is off so we don't have to be involved in your phone conversation. So mental health and substance abuse problems are common among young people, you know, and you know, as I talk about young people at the beginning, and you know, a lot of what we do in our world this day involves experiential things. And actually, I have young people in my life. You know, I have a grandson that lives with me, and he's like 15. We were not getting along last year. You know, so I don't know how many people have teenagers or young children that you're living with or dealing with every day. It's an experience, you know. But one of the things that, you know, like we're really going to talk about today is this idea that somehow, I don't think we, or even we as professionals maybe, but families and parents and grandparents don't really understand many times that mental health and substance abuse problems are common in young people. It's not an uncommon thing. 21% of U.S. children and adolescents have a diagnosable mental health or addiction disorder that affects their ability to function. That is 1 out of 5. 1 out of 5 kids have some kind of issue. 5 to 9% of youth 17 to 19 years of age have a serious mental disturbance that causes substantial impairment in how they function, you know, and may be often institutionalized. And mental health problems in adolescents often increase their use of alcohol, marijuana, and other drugs. And we're going to find out that kids medicating their emotional and mental health problems is a substantial part of the addiction problem with kids. They go together. You know, if you have a kid with an emotional crisis, they're going to be having a drug problem, most likely too. Some children and adolescents have a higher risk of developing mental health or substance use problems than others. And they're, the kids we work with. Those kids with family history of depression or mental health disorders. Those with developmental disabilities and chronic medical conditions. One of the things that really kind of disturbs me about the future of our system this year is, I think tonight there's also going to be a forum on the new agency, the new authority, the new mental health authority. And I was at the first one over at Northeast Guidance Center, and I asked about developmental disabilities, youth with developmental disabilities, and the emergence of substance abuse and mental health services. And they're really not ready to tackle right now the issue of developmental disabilities and substance abuse, which is really sad because it's something that we need to tackle. And for, the young people in the audience or even the older people in the audience who are researchers, we really need people to begin to work on the issue of how do we best work with kids with developmental disabilities and substance abuse issues, because, the dope man loves the AFC home. In the community. The dope man loves it, you know what I mean? And there's no doubt that we may not be paying attention, but the dope man is paying attention to kids and adults with developmental disabilities in our community. And it's something as professionals we need to address. We also have, for those kids who are questioning their sexuality or becoming aware of being gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender, another horizon of work that, as a community, as cultures, we're beginning to come to grips with, that there are kids who are having issues with sexuality. And it's a big issue in mental health and substance abuse because, of course, there's a lot of stress on them. And those in the juvenile justice system. And within the juvenile justice system, we find particularly the girls in there, more often than not, have serious mental health issues that need to be addressed. And, as a community, we know this, but maybe not know how to address it. Mott and University of Michigan, and several people, I think the Free Press also did a study on, what do parents think are most concerned about in terms of threats to the progress of their youth. And in 2011, this study was done, and the top two things was parents being concerned about their kids and their weight, their obesity, which is a big, big problem in our communities. But tied with that was the issue of drug abuse. Tobacco smoking, teen pregnancy, bullying, internet safety. Internet safety is a new one, right? An example of our technological prowess and the good things that are happening. There's some not all good things are happening on the internet. We need to pay attention. Stress, and that really is a big one. And, for me, being a senior, I was really surprised at times when I went and talked with kids and it came up, we are just stressed out. Kids have stress. I don't really remember having stress, that I was naming stress. I knew as a young person, it's not easy being an adolescent. And so one of my professors at one time told me that, nobody comes through childhood unscathed, So we all have some issues with childhood, but I don't think that I ever identified it as stress, So, but now they do. Alcohol, auto accidents, and another new one, sexting. And so that's, I'm not really sure what that is. We have to do some research on sexting, but I'm not sure what the difference is between internet safety and sexting. But maybe somebody can draw me and tell me. But, of these 10 top things, at least 3 of them have to do with addiction, the drugs, the tobacco, and the alcohol abuse. And so parents are really concerned, about that issue, and I think we're really confused about the issue of, well, I don't want my kids to get involved with drugs. The kids that get involved with drugs don't go to college. Or if they go to college and they get involved with drugs, they come home. Many times we've seen it. So these drugs are a big issue, but at the same time, I'm going to come back to the point that one thing that was not on the list for parents was emotional and mental health issues, which I really found kind of curious. But when we talk about prevalence, particularly of the drug abuse, and is that our whole community is changing in terms of these drugs. It's kind of like we got to keep up with it. But there's been a steady decline in. There was a steady decline. We were having a lot of success, kind of slowing down the abuse of drugs. But lately, it's been rising again. And the most common use of abuse of drugs is actually marijuana. And we're going to talk a little bit about that because as a community, we're kind of confused about marijuana. Is it a drug? Is it dangerous? Do I have a medical issue? We can. In Michigan, we can get our card, if we have a medical issue or an identified medical issue, and also, carrying an ounce of marijuana is legal, so you won't get arrested for that, at least locally. But the confusing issue is, of course, federally they don't accept that, so you could get arrested by the FBI, but not the Dearborn police. So, but between 2007 and 2011, marijuana grew amongst 8th graders, amongst 12th graders, 1 in every 5. And, I really believe that's underestimating, that, the rate of use of marijuana by 12th grade, we know probably 65–70% of the kids have experimented with marijuana these days. Recent years have shown a surge in the popularity of MDMA, and that is an interesting drug that was not around for me, but I was talking to one of my grandchildren who just finished college in Michigan, and he said, mollies are what's happening on the campus where he was at. I'm like, what is a molly? I thought that was a fish. There's a fish called a molly. But mollies are actually MDMA, and younger folks, they know what this MDMA is. And they tell me it makes you feel good, and you're all huggy-feely, and that's not a good thing necessarily either. Contributing to the increase in teenage substance abuse is the increase in the availability of prescription medications. Of course, that's a big, big deal. And we have a lot of kids who are, the acceptability factor, going on in our communities. Kids are regularly prescribed Ritalin, other drugs that become drugs of abuse for kids. So, I can see that it's confusing for them to be prescribed it, and then at the same time, if one of their friends wants some, they give it to their friend, and that's not a good thing, Conversely, alcohol use is at an all-time low. They are not drinking. So you don't have to worry too much about locking the liquor up. But, many are, of course. But it's far less prevalent, than the marijuana, the entry drugs in terms of the prescription drugs. And, parents have to be really kind of aware that experiences and environments can also increase or decrease the risk for mental health and substance use problems. As we know, we have this whole thing of protective factors and factors that are negative factors, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time. A few years ago, we used to spend a lot of time on protective factors and negative factors. But, basically, things like family stability, relationships, positive relationships in kids' lives, and positive community involvement, faith community involvement, Boy Scouts, and all those things, are really positive factors that keep kids on a good trajectory, not being bored, Music. I have one grandson that's he loves his music. He's been here performing, things like that kids can really have an alternative interest in. So many times it's hard to find something that kids are interested in. Are positive things of the life, but stress and psychological trauma many times are negative factors. And the psychological traumas and stress are going on all the time. Both mental health and substance abuse issues many times come out of our environment. But children and adolescents and families that have experienced significant loss, many times when I do these things, it reminds me of, I'm very much into experiential things. I think that, the relevance of how things have been, how I've seen things play out in my life, is what the experience is. And, I like to tell a story on this one about a young man that was very close with me, and his dad was a heroin addict, and struggled for many years with heroin. And at 9 years old, little Anthony's dad went to treatment. And, for heroin addicts, going to treatment is a good thing, but leaving treatment sometimes is not a good thing. And he left treatment and decided he was going to use, and as a consequence of his use that day, he died on his mom's couch. And so we had little Anthony, who was 9 years old, and him and his dad were very, very close. And I talked with his mom. I said, well, maybe we need to get Anthony some therapy, because he's very close to his dad. He's 9 years old. His dad just died tragically and unexpectedly. And yet, Anthony just seemed to be fine. No problems. 9-year-old, running around, doing what he did. He went to the funeral with me, seemed fine. Within 5 or 6 years, Anthony was having really very serious problems, And so, kids often respond to experiences of loss. So when you see a kid in a family that has experienced significant loss or trauma in the family, it's so important to, even if they don't express issues the same way that we might expect, then they still need to get some intervention. And I know you know that. Children and adolescents from poor families are particularly susceptible to drug and alcohol problems and emotional problems. And, there's a lot of reasons for that, too. We can go into that. But, one of the things is, as I was doing the presentation, I was thinking about my community, which I've come from a poor community, that even drugs was a part of the economics of a poor community. Some kids didn't think that, drugs was a way to make a little money. And many times the struggle between what career path I should take, and when you're working with kids who are poor, needs to bring up the issue of Well, you haven't thought about selling drugs, have you? Because that is a reality. And although it may seem to be strange, it is the reality that we have to work with. And children and adolescents who've been abused or neglected, that's really an important group of kids that always needs to be identified as possibly, exhibiting mental health and substance abuse issues. And children and adolescents who've been exposed to chronic violence in their home or their neighborhood, and these days, that's practically every time you turn on the TV, And, we go to schools and we talk to kids, and I know your experience. I was just talking to some ladies who work with the Juvenile Assessment Center. I know when you talk with the kids that you talk to, they've all experienced somebody being killed or, some tragedy in their neighborhood or their family, And these are, the growing grounds for both mental health and substance abuse issues. Welcome, everybody. Sorry your sight. You did get here. We haven't moved too far along. But early identification of problems with kids is really key. And this is, something I really want to dwell on for a minute because, what are the signs? Because even in my experience as a grandparent with a teen living with me, I have to make a disclaimer here, it's like my kids are always like, why are you talking about your grandkids? Well, I may have a PhD and I may be in substance abuse and I may be but my grandkids are just like everybody else's. They are doing everything everybody else is out there doing. And I have to, and that even is an additional stress for me. I'm Bureau of Substance Abuse. I'm the PhD, the drug czar for Detroit. How am I going to have my grandkids out here getting high? They don't care about what's happening to me. But the thing is, these are things we all have to address and we all have to talk about. It happens in the White House. One of the things I had to say was when we had George Bush in the White House, we had a lot of money for substance abuse prevention, treatment, and recovery. You know why? Because George is in recovery. Trying to be in recovery or is in recovery, And that's a wonderful thing because he has a heart for the experience and his family, has a family disposition towards alcoholism, which we know a lot of our families do, right? Many of us live in a family, with many alcoholics or folks in there. And that means that we have a sort of a genetic disposition for that. We need to talk to our kids about that if that is happening. And, his daughters, thank God, they seem to be doing great. But they went through a period, where they were drinking excessively and getting in problems, So this is something for everybody, but we don't really think about it and we don't really talk about it. And if there's anything we go away with today, it's like, let's think about these issues because the first slide said what? Mental health and substance abuse issues are predominant in our community and among our young kids. It's not the exception, really. Our kids are having problems. All kids have problems that need to be addressed, and addressing them early can often help. But early identification of possible mental health and substance abuse problems is essential. And I don't even know, we gotta, this is a really key for me because, I live in a community, in the African American community where, it's like, do anything but call me crazy. You know what I'm saying? It's like, there's this big stigma about, I may have a problem, but, we never think. I was raised up with a brother that had mental health issues. But we never identified it as a mental health issue. You know, I mean, he was just bad. You know, I mean, it was, you know, he just did things. He's just crazy, you know, but not clinically. You know, but we have to, you know, begin to not only think about our own families, but then project it onto the clients and the families that we serve. You know, that this is something that just like, you know, teaching about proper hygiene, you know, teaching about proper presentation of yourself at an interview. I mean, how do we also think about our mental health, ourselves even? You know what I'm saying? We think about mental disorders. Well, I don't have schizophrenia, but I may not be taking care of my mental health, right? But caregivers are usually the first to observe, or are the first that could possibly observe early signs of problems with behavioral or mental health issues. And a lot of times with kids, we will identify a behavioral issue, but I don't think we correlate it back to a emotional or mental health issue. Medical providers, teachers, or direct care workers, like many of us are here, serving youth, are individuals positioned to identify problems at an early age. And a big issue, of course, is just as schools screen for vision and hearing problems, mental health and substance abuse should be included in the screenings in our schools, and it's never done, basically. You know, and it is a huge issue. The kid who is kicked out of kindergarten, and you know kids are kicked out of kindergarten. I have a grandson that was kicked out of kindergarten. Right. I mean, you know, I have like 10 grandkids, and about 9 of them are boys. If you got 9 grandsons, you got a behavior problem in the room. Somewhere, right? We say 1 in 5, 1 in 4, you got 2 behavior problems in the room. You know, and we, you know, but he got kicked out of kindergarten. Yes, and we've been dealing with his issues till now. He's coming along good, but he needs special attention. You understand what I'm saying? Because the behavior, that quality of him, you know, is there, and it needs to be special. It's just like if he was triple promoted in the 5th grade, you know what I mean? You have those that have special characteristics. Very intelligent. We have some that have special characteristics. Very sensitive, very angry. You know, we have kids that just come out angry, you know, and we have to work with them with that issue as they go along. But just, and so our schools, and for you all that are, hopefully, as our new paradigm shift, you know, I believe that we will start doing behavioral and mental health assessments in the schools. You know, and our schools should not just be kicking the kids out, but should be kicking them to us, right? Don't kick them out, kick them to us. You know, so we can provide the kind of support that's going to help them grow into the type of adults that we all want them to be. Youth shelters and child welfare agencies serving high-risk youth with elevated risks, you know, and like I say, that's many of you guys. And one of the things that we don't really pay attention to is the adolescents themselves and them understanding if they're having a problem. You know, I think all adolescents feel like they're unique, you know, one way or the other. You know, it's like, you know, why can't I be like so-and-so? You know, but adolescents need to be able to understand and be communicated to in terms of what could be a problem. But the reason that I think we don't get involved as much as we should in the conversation about mental health and substance abuse issues, of course, is that stigma issue. You know, we always talk about stigma, but it is real, you know, and it's not only real in the community, it's real in us, you know, so we also need to address stigma in ourselves as we go about our profession, particularly us in the helping profession. Stigma and lack of awareness in communities and in families is a huge barrier to having conversation with youth about mental health and substance abuse issues. You know, if mom doesn't recognize a behavioral problem, or if a dad or grandpa and them don't observe it and aren't able to come to grips with it, you know, then you know, we got a ways to go. You know, and even in my own family, when my grandson got kicked out of kindergarten, my daughter was not like, he's got a behavioral health problem. It's like, what's wrong with that teacher? Why did she kick him out? He's only 5. You know what I mean? But he pushed a little girl. You know what I mean? It's a behavior, but mom's not ready to accept that as possibly a problem, because, you know, she just doesn't know. It's not a bad thing. You know, our awareness of what issues, special issues that we need to pay attention to is important. So, and to highlight this, like it says, studies have repeatedly found that 75% of youth with emotional and behavioral problems are not identified and usually do not receive the needed care. Now, I'm not going to say, I really hate that idea that they're not identified. I think they are identified. Many times they will not let you not know they're there. You know, they're not identified as what the issue is. They're not identified as a behavioral health problem or as a mental health problem. You know, they're identified as bad, you know, disorderly, you know, and that way they don't actually receive the needed care. Because the bad kid, well, that's just somebody we need to probably lock up, you know, and looking at the rate of incarceration in our country, you know, that's what basically happens to many kids. And of course, we all know that where is the new mental health hospital? The prisons, right? So as I said before, and this was a crazy little slide. I tried to, this little slide actually, you know, you see this little piece in the corner down here that's looking kind of silly, but that's that first chart about the Mott thing. And, you know, it occurred to me as I was putting my presentation together that even as I was thinking about it, in that whole thing that parents identify problems, they never identified mental health as a possible issue with their kids. 10 things: sexting, texting, you know, alcohol and drug abuse. And you could say, well, maybe those things are mental health issues or emotional issues. But I still think it's significant that it wasn't identified in families. And it wasn't said, well, you know, this is a problem that could stymie and influence in a very big way the life of my child or my grandchild, their emotional and mental well-being. You know, and I don't know that we, in the Western culture, take a lot of interest in that. And I'm also really gratified. It's not a part of the presentation, but you know, I go off on stuff. But you know, there's a lot of work being done in psychology around, well, 2 things: positive psychology, you know, which is really focusing on things that are, you know, not disorder. You know, we focus on historically, we focus on the problem. We have an addict. We want them to learn everything about being an addict. And they could teach us about it being an addict because they are an addict. So then I get up there and try to explain addiction. What they need to know is something about a positive health, and also the whole idea of kind of an Eastern idea of getting into ourself, and understanding the way our mind and our mental framework works. Because a lot of times we don't identify ourselves that we have a problem. But the problems that we see in youth were never identified on here. Depression, ADHD, oppositional defiant disorder, my grandson, anxiety disorder, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and post-traumatic stress disorder. These are problems that kids have. And in our home, are we able to recognize that? Are our kids themselves able to recognize, or have we educated them to say this may be a problem? If somebody gets cut, we got the Neosporin you got to put on there and wash it off. And, we have a lot of ways of helping to protect our kids' physical health. Right now, I was down at Whole Foods, and the one grandson that lives with me, he's like, oh, we should eat organic things. I'm like, you should buy some more. You should pay for the organic things. But we should eat organic things, And he's kind of influenced me. Like, I'm doing the little vegetarian thing now. We're really concerned about our health. But, I don't find it easy to have a conversation with him about mental health or drugs. And he doesn't have he hasn't brought up, I'm not feeling happy today. I've been kind of blue for the last week or two. Is that a problem? Is that a problem? My friend left, and, my granddaughter, she's been like in her room for a week or two, sad and sullen. Is there a time to do something about that? If she had an infection on her hand and it was turning red, we would be at the doctor's office, right? But when she's, feeling blue and sad and, concerned about her looks, oh, well, she'll get over that. She'll get over it. Just get over it. Well, our mental health is not something we necessarily just get over. It's something we need to cultivate, and we need to identify when there are issues so that we can, do something about it. So why did parents not identify emotional disorders as an issue in the health of youth? And in our work, I think that we need to be advocates of helping people understand that our emotions are a part of us. We have behaviors, we have feelings, and we have emotions. And we have our primary care, our physical health. You can go anywhere and get some primary care services. And this is the way our new paradigm is shifting. Hallelujah, thank the Lord. You may be able to go get some behavioral health care for more than 20 visits. You may be able to actually find somebody. I don't know how many times I've run into a parent that says, well, Dr. Trent, I got my teenage son, he's got acting out, or, what do I do? And it ends up, the final answer has been for our system, well, when he, breaks the law or does something serious, then we'll figure out a way to get him some help. But how do we access services, before that time? That's really, really important. But the lack of awareness, these are not questions for us to answer, but they're there. Do we know how to identify mental health in ourselves or the people around us? And identify it and label it. if we don't identify and label, then we can't make progress on something. Are we in denial about emotional and mental problems in ourselves, in our families, in our communities? Are there cultural issues? You know, are there just some things we've been raised not to accept? You know, I think that most cultures, this whole issue of depression, and you know, depression is probably the biggest killer in our community. You know, this whole depression thing. And the idea is really there's a big stigma on depression. The people are depressed, they feel like, you know, everybody just feeling like, why don't I just get over it? You know, I can't get past, you know, mom dying. You know, I mean, and everybody's saying, well, it's okay, my mom died too. You know, you'll get over it. Just pray, and praying is good, you know, but, you know, it's not a proactive, it's not the really identification that you need help with something. You know what I mean? It's putting it back on you, you know, to just get over it, you know. Well, you just don't just get over things sometimes. And what about stigma and lack of behavioral health education, which is our job, right? One thing if anything we can do is be an advocate for better behavioral health education. Lack of awareness, you should be aware of certain feelings they may have and should be educated on how to seek help or talk to someone about it. And that's, I think, the biggest complaint you hear about from so many youth, that if they are feeling something, if they are feeling attracted to a person of the same sex, you know, or confused about that, you know, and that, I mean, I think that may have happened to everybody, you know. Am I gay? You know? I mean, but it's not something that seems that we can talk to somebody about or somebody ever addresses to me, you know, as a young man coming up, you know. We just, you know, we just want to assume everybody's straight. But as we know, everybody isn't, you know. And there's not only everybody isn't, there's gradations along the way. You know, it's not this side and it's not that side, you know, and we have to somehow, if we're going to have healthy children, be able to come to grips with these issues and have them as a part of dinner conversation. You know, and hey, the biggest culprit is us men, you know, and the biggest hypocrites, you know. But, you know, and children should have to know somewhere along the line that they're not alone. And you hear so many kids that talk about, well, you know, I felt like I was the only one that felt like this. You know, I was the only one that was really depressed. You know, I was really, you know, the only one that, you know, felt this self-esteem issue. You know, and, you know, somewhere along the line it gets to be, and as we know, as we work with people, you know, one of the greatest revelations we find in services and in therapy is when persons realize, I'm not the only one. I could actually talk to somebody else who had the same problem. You know, so this whole idea of being isolated and alone is trauma. You know, getting help is what counts. Help is available and treatments work. And you should know that they don't need to wait, that they should talk with a helpful adult, such as a family member, well, I don't know about that, or a doctor, or a nurse, or a consultant. These days, we're coming to the realization that even better than all those people is a peer who has had that experience, is maybe better than even talking to a doctor. You know, at least at first, that I could understand that somebody I respected and somebody I can relate to actually had this problem too. not Dr. Trent, PhD. Don't have no problems. All his grandchildren are perfect. You know, but we need to, there's something, and one of the things that I found out there, and I went looking for my presentation on the good old internet, and I was safe. I didn't go to any of them other places, but action signs, and there's something that was commissioned, it's called the Action Project, and I found it really interesting, and if you get an opportunity, I think in the presentation, I put a couple links there so you'll be able to go to it. But the Action Project lists about 11 things that kids should be aware of, and we should be aware of. You know, if things are happening with our kids or our grandkids, then we should kind of pay attention. The first one is feeling very sad and withdrawn for more than 2 weeks. 2 weeks is not a very long time. You know, I've suffered loss and it went on for more than 2 weeks. You know, just doing something and all of a sudden, I'm bawling. What is wrong with me? Maybe I can't go out. I can't handle my emotions. Feeling very sad and withdrawn for 2 weeks. And one of the reasons that I became a PhD was when I was a kid. Actually, I have to make a confession. I was also a kid with mental health problems as a child. And I was institutionalized for some time at Lafayette Clinic downtown. You know where Lafayette Clinic is? Well, I was one of those kids in Lafayette Clinic. And I had a wonderful, life-changing experience at Lafayette Clinic, and met particularly a nurse that was very instrumental in my positive development in life, just by the connection. I don't know that it was therapy, but it was a sort of love, and the other kids on the ward, and from that experience, I periodically, and what I'd suffered from, I think, was PTSD. We didn't have PTSD back then. PTSD is kind of new. It came with Vietnam. This was before Vietnam. But the thing is that trauma has always been there, and going through a very traumatic event as a kid, I couldn't get past it. And without these helping people, I may not have been able to get to the point where I am now, but it made me also have a love for this work that we do, and knowing that from my own experience, that the work we do, and you don't have to be the PhD, you can be the caseworker, you can be the nurse, you can be the receptionist, and have a very positive influence on the young person's life, to also recognize and validate how they feel, So one of the signs for a kid, and if you experience them in your family or kids around you, this whole deal being sad or withdrawn, but kids be sad and withdrawn sometimes, come in the house and go to their room and get on the computer. That might be a problem, but also seriously trying to harm themselves or kill themselves. So this is from the framework of the kid, because these are also things that kids should know. If you're feeling like you really want to hurt somebody, and we've all kind of felt that way, or making plans to do so. It's serious, and we've all had in our society experiences where, a kid might want to actually tell somebody that they're thinking these things or seriously thinking these things. Sudden overwhelming fear for no reason, sometimes with a racing heart or a fast heartbeat. Kids experience panic attack, and they may experience them and they just like, wow, what was that? I didn't know what that was. And then what do you do about it? I got a story about everything. But I always thought panic attacks were somebody else's problem. And, you know, I don't know, it was about, I think about 50 years old. I am a little older than 50. But I was driving to Cleveland. And if you've been driving to Cleveland, there's a road that goes across water. And I had drove to Cleveland a lot of times. But I drove across Cleveland and I had a panic attack going across that water. And then I noticed that somebody said, let's go, we have a cottage in Idlewild. I don't know, the older people know what Idlewild is. But, and I had to go up I-75 over that horrible bridge. Some people think it's beautiful, but I mean, it was like, okay, I'm not going that way. I have to find another route because I can't go over that bridge. So I noticed that I was developing this anxiety in these situations. And then it became I-75. You know I'm telling the truth because you get I-75 going north, going down south, going south, across the factories and all that. Oh my God, I got to cross that? Okay, well, I mean, when you're a PhD and you're experiencing these things, the question is, now what do I do about it? You know, but actually I recognized that I was experiencing panic in certain situations. And so I knew that I had to do something about it. So I did do something about it. And I know that there's a way of addressing panic attack because I'm not panicked going to Cleveland or going down I-75 towards Southwest Detroit. But I haven't fixed the problem going over the Zilwaukee Bridge. I ain't going over that bridge. They're aware that they can have issues in their behavior, in their feelings, and their emotions. This can happen, you know. Emotions, you know that's going to happen. Somebody is going to put you down, you know. For kids, involvement in many fights, using a weapon, or wanting to badly hurt somebody. You know, we got a lot of little boys that's fighting all the time. What is that about? You know, is that normal? Is that normal? Is that just what boys do? Severe out-of-control behavior that can hurt yourself or others. You know, is hurting yourself. You know, we had a lot of kids that, you know, not the extreme of cutting yourself, but, you know, a lot of kids find themselves in situations that are always kind of negative. It's like, you know, I've worked with folks, it's like, why is it you seem to always put yourself in a situation where you're going to get hurt? You know, it's not just getting hurt, it's making yourself available for that. That's a part of that. Not eating, throwing up, or using laxatives to make themselves lose weight. You know, we have this, you know, we have big issues with men and women these days about their weight, about how we look. You know, I mean, and we can go to extremes, right? You know, I mean, and young kids, you know, hey, I want to be a model. Them models got issues. You know, you got to stay that skinny? With all these hormones in the food, you know, that my grandson is telling me about, growth hormones in the food. It's not our fault, it's the growth hormones. Intense worries or fears that get in the way of our daily activities. You know, those are, you know, what's normal, what's not normal. I don't have to know what normal is. Extreme difficulty in concentrating or staying still that puts you in a physical danger or causes school failure. You know, and like I said, there's a website, go to this website, pull these things out, in your work, think about them, and, repeated use of drugs or alcohol. Severe mood swings that causes problems in relationships. That sounds simple, but hey, we grew up in families with severe mood swings in relationships, right? Drastic changes in your behavior or your personality, or a person's that's around you. But, with the substance use issues, and I'm going to try to, I got 3 parts, so I don't want to stay here too long, but issues related to substance use in our society. And, there's a lot we have to do, and, we have, around this whole issue of drugs, I'm confused, I mean, I don't take any, but, but legal use, political issues, legal issues, family issues, health and wellness issues. I mean, like I say, we're a confused society about drugs right now. I doubt if there's anybody in this room that didn't take a pill this morning for something. Whether, I know I took a whole handful. I got flaxseed, and I don't even know what those things do to me. I got one the doctor gave me, and I got a whole handful I got from the health store. My multivitamin and my, what have I got? Ginkgo biloba, the thing that makes makes old people remember things. I haven't done a scientific study, but I know I take that pill, So, I mean, but we're a pill in a drug culture. We're a pill in a drug culture. We can't stand, pain? Oh my God. A headache? Get me some Tylenol in a hurry, and the stronger the better. You go to the dentist and they give you an addictive narcotic, for a toothache. Our medical profession, you got to think about what you're getting. A lot of people leave the doctor's office and go to the dope house. Or the dope house is the is the pharmacy down the street. We are drug shopping. You look at there's this amazing statistic that people come from West Virginia to come up here to buy OxyContin. This is a big place where pharmacies are out of control here. There's been some arrests. You see the big drug busts of the pharmacies. They ain't busting dope houses, they're busting pharmacies. We know, that you can buy them. And if you really want some good drugs, find you a senior citizen. That's right. They're not getting it, they're on a fixed income. You can not only get Vicodin and Darvon, whatever all them things are, but you can get Viagra too. So we got a drug for everything. So it is things that I think that we need to think about and talk in our families about. And observe our drug cabinet. And somebody asked me, well, Dr. Trent, what do you, I got drugs in my drug cabinet. I don't look at them. I got kids. Do you know that your drug is missing? The kids are actually having parties with, a jar of drugs, and they just got them from the drug cabinet. Grandma's, she got stuff up in there that'll help you feel better. Because, drugs do make you feel better, right? They have a positive effect, but a negative consequence many times for many people. Signs and symptoms of alcohol and other use in kids. And there's another website. Is it here someplace? I hope I didn't leave these off. But behavior issues. And, one of the biggest problems, of course, is addressing or even coming to grips with the idea that your kid, your grandkid is using drugs. Is it okay? I don't know. Their dad is using drugs all the time. We know that, right? Smoking weed in the car, they driving, weed is like practically a normal drug these days, isn't it? Huh? Are we confused about, but we're not, I'm not confused. Alcohol is legal, but I don't think most of us are ready for our 15-year-old to be getting drunk in the morning before going to school, although some are. But we may be a little less confused about smoking some weed, and every once in a while they walk by and you get this, what is that? Don't clean up their room. If you really don't want to stress in your life, do not clean up your grandkids' room, okay? Because, what you're going to find. Because this is normative behavior. When you have a 10 or a 12-year-old with substance abuse prevention treatment, we get a person in recovery, 9 times out of 10, they tell us they started smoking when they were 9, 10 years old, 8, 9, 10. There was another study that was really, really good that talked about the experiences of kids with co-occurring disorders in treatment. And this one was really, really good too. And I know the link is here, so go to it and print it out. Take a good look at it. The purpose of the study was to give youth and their parents the opportunity to reflect on and give voice to their experiences, to identify their successes and concerns when seeking treatment for mental health and substance abuse issues. And the issue, the name of the thing was blamed and ashamed. And the findings of the study were powerful, for me anyway, that youth with co-occurring mental health and substance abuse disorders and their families rarely got the kind of help they needed at the time that they needed it. And that services and supports were fragmented, isolated, and rigid. These negative experiences, however, direct us to the changes that are necessary to have better outcomes. So folks that went, families that did actually go for services, many times found them not as helpful, and many times experienced the feeling that they were the problem rather than addressing the problem. And I think a lot of times it's a problem with families too, because of course anything that happens to your kids, you're going to feel like, well, what did I do wrong? And we many times have to help families understand that you maybe didn't do anything wrong. It's not anything you did wrong. The wrong thing is not having a good solution for it. But right now, our system is changing a lot. And I think in really a good way to help us better deal with the problems of our families. So I went to this is the, Michigan has a website at NDOC, at Michigan Department of Community Health. And there's a lot of change going on all levels of the state. And I really want you to know about these changes, so we're going to spend some time talking about these changes. But on the website, there's what used to be called the Bureau of Substance Abuse is now called the Office of Recovery-Oriented Systems of Care. So that should tell you something if you're in the business, right? So it's not the Bureau of Substance Abuse anymore. It's now the Office of Recovery-Oriented Systems of Care. And they have a narrative, and I took the thing, right? People always say, I don't want to read to you because you can read, but we're going to read this couple things. But it says that we're in the midst of an extraordinary time in the history of healthcare in the United States. The recently enacted healthcare reform legislation is changing the landscape for all health-related services. We're glad about that, and we're glad that somehow we finally got Medicaid expansion in Detroit. I am anyway, but I know that you all should be, because that means that over 300,000 people in March will have access to health care that they didn't have before. And those people will be the clients that you serve. the folks aging out of foster care, the men without children. In addition, over the past few years, a recovery revolution has gained momentum and is now sweeping the country. The movement has its roots in the voices of people in recovery and their family members who are increasingly calling for services that support people, not only that support people not to only initiate recovery, but also sustain recovery in their communities of choice. When we talk about chronic disorders and, I said, well, when I was a kid, I had a mental health problem. Well, I still have that mental health problem. That's a chronic disorder. I don't ever expect that trauma to leave my brain. It's not going to happen. Sometimes I'll have a bad day, and I'll be stressed out about that trauma, So a chronic disorder is not like the flu. We get over the flu. We'll get it again, but we didn't continue to have the flu. And we have to recognize that people, that all of us can have something about us that is always there, that we can deal with and have a happy life. So I can deal with post-traumatic stress disorder, and I can go to school and be a PhD and do all those things. And our job is to help others do that. And that's what this kind of revolution is about, because, and I'm real happy about it, because sometimes they say, well, Dr. Trent was a part of the, and I'll tell you this story too. But I was a late bloomer into this work, I actually was in education, retired from education, before I retired from the health. And when I left education, I decided to go back to school and get my PhD. And so I did. And, I'm having a senior moment. What was the point I was getting ready to make? You know what a senior moment is? But don't worry, it's going to come back. But they talk about, but the point really was, when I went, the first job, and I had this, I had so many experiences with people in my life and drugs in my family, and, I didn't never understand what was going on. I had an aunt that was the most wonderful, favorite person in my life, but she was a heroin addict, and she was like a prostitute. My grandmother was crying, and she was stealing stuff. I was like, okay, I'm 9 or 8, what is this about? Nobody ever kind of explained it, but her life was a tragedy. And, she eventually died, which we all are going to do. But, her life was not a happy one. And my experiences with friends in my environment, my life, many times was the same. I have had a lot of friends who died early, I guess we would say. And I never really, and so I always had this kind of idea of understanding what this was about. So that's why I kind of initiated my way into psychology. They say most of us in the mental health fields are really trying to seek a solution to our own problems, which is a good thing. But, I was really disappointed when I went to my first internship. I did that in your PhD in clinical psychology. You have to do a year internship at a hospital. And I did it at the VA hospital. And I was like, one thing about psychology at the time I did it is you can't do substance abuse. You know what I mean? Somehow substance abuse is in the DSM, but it's not really a mental health issue. You understand what I'm saying? So, but it's in there. So I'm like, okay, this is kind of confusing. But when I got there, I said, well, I wanted to do my dissertation on with substance abuse issues. And I had to go back to the master's level program to get somebody to help me with my dissertation, because nobody in the PhD program had any experience with substance abuse. Because if anybody came to a real PhD in psychology and said you had substance abuse, they said, well, go get some treatment, and when you get finished with your substance abuse issue, come back and talk to me, and I'll be your therapist, you know. So, and then when I got to the hospital, they said, well, I said, well, I want to work with the substance abuse treatment center. And they said, well, okay. But when I got there, they said, well, you know, Dr. Trent, you got to, this is a different group of people. You know, they are like antisocial personality disorders. They are manipulative, and they lie, and they steal. And if you don't watch them, they're going to bring drugs in here and drink in the treatment center. I'm like, okay. Well, they're addicts, I guess. So, but the thing is that, so the experience was not one where, and people who were in what we call recovery were not really valued in the system or utilized. They were kind of around, but they never were taken seriously as productive components of our system. You know, what they really needed some therapy, they needed some psychodynamics. We didn't know what they needed, but they needed to stop using drugs. And if they used drugs, we kicked them out. And if they came back after being kicked out, we dogged them and said, we're going to let you come back this one more time, but you're making these decisions, and we're just going to let you stay out there until you hit rock bottom. And when you hit rock bottom, you'll crawl back in here and we'll do something for you, you know. But it's on you, you know. And that was a really kind of terrible experience for me, because it was not the experience I had for my own disorder, you know. And so a part of that is how this recovery revolution began to get started in many of our places. And in our hospital, it began with a questioning of what we were doing. You know, why are we kicking people out for behaving like they behave? You know, we acknowledge they're an addict, you know, and they're going to try to use drugs, and if they use drugs, then we kick them out. You know, so it was a crazy thing. So we began, and what has happened is there's been so much research, and you got to go out to different sites. There's somebody called William White, which I'll have some notes in here about, who we're really in a big paradigm shift. And I don't know if you know what a paradigm shift is, but I mean, the world is turning upside down in terms of the work that we do. You know, the way that it was is not the way that it's going to be. You know, and so that's a little bit about what we're going to talk about. And one of these things is not just initiating recovery, but understanding that we have to work, that recovery is a lifelong process, you know, and that we have to work lifelong, you know, in the same with the mental health system. And if you go on there, one of my favorite places is YouTube. If you go out there, you'll see some great psychologists who have schizophrenia, you know, and they are so wonderful, you know, about when they were in the hospital. And, you know, they don't want to be a case to be managed. They're actually a person. Somehow we divorce, there's some ailments in this mental health and this substance abuse, or we don't see the person, you know, as real. We see them as, you know, somebody that we have to manage their life. You know, because they got developmental disabilities, they got an addiction. They can't just go out there and live like a normal person. You know, they need us to tell them how to do it. You know, well, that's all kind of changing. There is really hope. So the changing landscape of all healthcare related systems and services, things are changing. And, you know, it's going to be so easy for us as practitioners, as people who provide services, have organizations, great organizations who are serving people. You got to get on the boat and understand what's going on right now. right? Because by this time next year, it's already changing. Mental health is changing. They're up there making legislation and changing stuff on how you're going to do your work right now. So I'm going to give you a little clue as to what's going on, but you're going to have to do it for yourself, because if you don't know where you're going, you might end up somewhere else. I love Yogi Berra. I don't know if he has a mental health issue, but but he's always telling the truth. If you don't know where you're going, you might end up somewhere else. What is driving the healthcare transformation? Well, we got the Affordable Care Act of 2010. And guess what? Most of us in the healthcare profession don't know what the hell it's about. Right? What is this Affordable Care Act, and why are people so mad about it, and why are other people so happy about it? Well, it's on us. Enrollment started October the 1st in Michigan and across the nation for people to get the Affordable Care Act. And the services will start in January, I understand. The revolutionary paradigm shift in how we view the treatment of chronic disorders and how we see the position of the person in the new configuration. You know, the whole thing of how we approach the chronic diseases that we deal with is changing. The failure of the current system to control costs and deliver the highest quality of services to our citizens is what's driving this change. Healthcare has not been as good as it should be. It's already happening. I like those little things sometimes. I don't know if well, one of these days I'm going to learn to make the things that move and jump, and, you know, what do they call those? But on the state level, what's changing? Our state allowed federal government to set up the exchange. So Michigan doesn't have its own exchange, and I don't know if you know what an exchange is. I know this gets long, so, you know, you kind of move, and if you got to go and come back. But the exchange is like a shopping mall, a healthcare shopping mall, you know, and you can go there and you can shop for insurance. And each state has one. You know, we have one. And if you go to healthcare.gov, you will find the link for Michigan, and you can go there and shop for your health insurance. It's became a reality in my life because I got a letter the other day from the city of Detroit. I'm retired from the city of Detroit. And for those that are not retirees from the city of Detroit, you may not have paid attention to the newspaper the other day, but it said that retirees in Detroit who previously had health insurance will not have health insurance as of January. The only people that will have health insurance are people who are 65 years or older and are on Medicare. That includes me. But it does not include my wife, who is not 65. But thank goodness she'll be 65 in January of 2014. So we slipped by. But think of all the other people. What is the alternative now? And I don't know, in your life, you need to learn about these exchanges because it's going to happen to some of you. Every retiree who is less than 65 in the city of Detroit who previously had health insurance will have to go to the exchange and get health insurance through the Affordable Care Act, which some people call Obamacare, which I think is a good name, but sounds like a bad name to people who hate Obama. But the thing is so what they're going to do is give the people $125 a month, and you will have to go to the exchange and shop for your insurance and use your $125 as purchase money to get your new insurance. That's revolutionary, folks. if you work for a company that has less than 50 people, your company may decide to give you $100 a month until you go shop and get you some Obamacare. Okay, so the whole landscape of how we get insurance is going to change. Our state did approve approve the Medicaid expansion. A lot of people don't know what that is. Anybody know what Medicaid expansion is? Or you just heard it? You just heard it. Well, the federal government also says since we're getting this new insurance and everybody has to have it, all the people that didn't have Medicaid who qualify financially can get Medicaid. And the federal government said, we're going to pay the state to provide it. Some of the states are mad, and so they didn't take Medicaid expansion. Michigan said, and Snyder, wonderful guy that he is, said, well, he was for it, but his other friends were not, and so they approved Medicaid expansion, but delayed it until March of 2014. That means that Michigan is losing, I think it's like $6 million a day reimbursement for the people who would be on Medicaid if they expanded it today. But it will happen in March. And what that means is that 320,000 people in the state of Michigan who did not previously have health insurance will have Medicaid. They're not in the group that we are. They're not working people. You know, they're people who are not. And many of them are men and women who are in poverty but don't have children, because Medicaid covered children or women with children. So as of that time, you will be eligible to get reimbursed for the people you're serving. Passed legislation in Michigan, there was legislation passed to eliminate the substance abuse coordinating agencies. SEMCA, you heard of SEMCA? Detroit, October 2014, SEMCA will be gone. No more. No more coordinating agency for substance abuse. No more Detroit coordinating agency. No more PACE. That's the one in Oakland County. And they're required that the mental health authority be established in the county of Wayne by October 2013. And sure enough, it was started January. So whether you know it or not, there's a new mental health authority in the county of Wayne. It is not run by the county of Wayne. It is an independent authority. And it will have the substance abuse coordinating agencies in it by October of 2014. In Wayne County, we established the authority. We have a new board for the authority. We have a new young man. His name is Tom Watkins. He's the new CEO and president of Wayne County Mental Health Authority. That's really important because the Wayne County Mental Health Authority has about $600 million a year that they provide services for. So probably all of you all get paid from that money, one way or the other. And so the operations, all substance abuse services will be in Mental Health Authority as of 2014. And they're having meetings, the last meeting on the forums about how we're going to integrate mental health, substance abuse into mental health. The last one is tonight at Northeast Guidance Center, 5 to 7. So, so how's that working for you? There's my guy. Treatment, okay, but you know, so this whole paradigm shift is changing. And the thing is that a part of it has to do with these concepts that we've had previously about treatment. What is it? Treatment is a part of recovery, and what is it? And everybody's got recovery in their name. The Office of, it's not substance abuse anymore, it's the Office of Recovery-Oriented Systems of Care. So you got to start talking recovery now, not treatment. You know, treatment is there, but it's different. Treatment is a part of recovery, but it's not equal to recovery. Treatment is one of the things that you do in your recovery process, right? The goal of treatment is absence of symptoms, and the goal of recovery is holistic health. And we, you know, we throw these terms around like holistic, patient, person-centered stuff, and we don't really get it. But recovery involves your whole life, not just your recovery from substance abuse. It involves, am I working? You know, I can't be very healthy if I don't have a job. I'm sorry. That's a mental health problem right there, you know. So I got to have, our clients, we know they need, in order to really substantially recover, they need a whole lot of things besides just talking to us about, you know, they need a job, they need education, you know, they need other things. Recovery is different for each individual, and the social determinants of health need to be addressed before recovery process can move forward. So the recovery, this concept, and this, we have these nice big, isn't that crazy? Isn't that a crazy chart? But what this chart really means, and it's something called the social determinants of health, and a whole lot of PhDs spend a lot of time putting this together, okay? And what it really boils down to is that our health is about our life. You know, our health is about mom dying and how much money we got and, you know, where I live. And do we have Obamacare? It's about political things. It's about physical health care things. You know, it's hard to recover when you got a toothache, you know, or you got HIV. You know, how does that impact my recovery? You know, so the social determinants of health, and this whole chart just means that our health is determined by a myriad of things. And we can go down governance, social things, behavioral things, healthcare systems. You know, the systems are government. You know, who's the mayor has an impact on our health sometime. And one of the things that we also, you know, just can't have this single-minded idea about people with problems, and that when they say that problems are individual, you know, it's so much easier for me to just put people in a box to say, well, this is a person who's got a mental health problem and a substance abuse problem. But I mean, this is got to be a famous little box. And at first I was kind of not so sure about it, but I'm more sure about it now. But it tries to divide our co-occurring population into some groups that may help us. One, though, is where we have less severe mental disorder and less severe substance abuse disorder. You know, that the person has some sort of mildness about both conditions. And then two, we have less severe mental health disorders and more severe substance abuse. So some people can be, you know, big time addict and, you know, not have as much severe mental health. But then we got the people with very severe mental health issues and some substance abuse issues, and the other person with very severe mental health and very severe substance abuse issues. And so one of those things that it helps us do is say, well, people are not just one thing. You know, that there's and this is very important in how we're going to have to look at things. We have these stages. We have quadrants of the severity of the conditions, but we also have, so we need to have different techniques and skills to work with each one of these quadrants. You know, But at least we have to begin to think, okay, well, what do I do with the person with severe, and the person with mild? What's going to be my treatment strategy that's going to be different for each of those? How do I even assess that they are that way? But it helps us begin to identify things. Now, treatment does work. And a lot of times within this whole concept of recovery, people think, well, are you against treatment? You know, no, treatment is my life's blood. We have to treat people. Treatment actually does work. But there have been some issues with our treatment that we have to face clearly, you know. And research has highlighted the limitations of some of the prevailing models of this whole treatment concept solely by itself. And that is that we have high recidivism. 64% of those entering public funded treatment already have been to treatment 4 or 5 times. You know, 9 times out of 10 when you meet somebody coming with a problem, they've been there before. You know, so this high recidivism is an issue we need to look at in our agencies and stuff, you know, in ourselves, some ways. High attrition during treatment, you know. Every day you know, I've been working with some of the mental health agencies. It's like, you know, if you don't come for 2 or 3 visits, we put you on you're out of service, the out of service part. And, you know, most of the people are out of service. They don't come back, you know, and our attitude in our prevailing model is sort of like, well, if they don't come back, we put them on the did not come back list. You know, we don't have any responsibility for those folks. You know, when they need help and seek help, they'll come back and we'll get them. That may be a problem. Poor outcomes of those who've completed most of our treatment, most resumed substance use at least, within a year, with relapse being the highest in the first 90 days. I would say 70% of people that receive that treatment are using again in 2 or 3 months. Those are issues that need to be addressed. And without blaming the client, right? What do we know about recovery? You know, the issues that we're talking about recovering from are chronic issues that have a chronic course. And stability in recovery from alcoholism or drug addiction really is not reached until 4 or 5 years of abstinence. You know, it's really going to take 4 or 5 years for us to really, or for the people themselves, to really be secure in their recovery. You know, it's one day at a time, but to really, even 4 or 5 years, you know, me and myself, I claim it. I claim recovery. I was a cigarette smoker, and I smoked for 30 years, and then I quit when I went to get to be a psychologist because I thought psychologists don't smoke. First day I got to class, everybody went out for a cigarette. I'm like, how are we supposed to be teaching people good behavior when we don't have it? But anyway, so psychologists smoke, okay? But I quit, and I was at work. I had been quit for about 5 years, just like they say. And I was sitting with some friends, and one of them had a cigarette, and it's like, okay, well, I can take a puff. What's one cigarette? I've been quit for 5 years. What is one cigarette going to do? Do you know within a month I was smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day and getting sick as hell? Excuse language. But I mean, that is the way this works. You know, even after 5 years of abstinence from cigarettes, 1 cigarette, and I was smoking just like I had, and my body couldn't take it. You know, I couldn't smoke like that. But my brain was right back where I was, smoking 2-pack cigarettes a day. And you can't afford to smoke 2-pack cigarettes a day anymore. You got to have a good job to be smoking 2-pack of cigarettes a day. But 4 or 5 years, 4 or 5 years for recovery. Are we prepared to work with our people 4 or 5 years with chronic disorders to get them stable to a point where they won't? Or do we even think that? Short periods of abstinence are really periods of brief dormancy and not sustained recovery. Post-discharge continuing care enhances recovery outcomes, but only 1 in 5 clients receive such care. We think that you go in treatment center, you spend 30 days, 60 days, if you really get some great treatment, 60 days. And when you get out of there, you got God, and you got out of here. Don't come back, and that's it. So we know that, but peer support is also critical, and that's what we talked about before. Enhances long-term recovery outcomes. This is one thing that another big thing that we have to realize. And the great part is probably half of us are in recovery from something, And so it's a great attraction. This work is a great attraction for people who've also experienced it. So peer support is critical. I mean, if you're working with people with chronic disorders and you don't have a person who have experienced that chronic disorder in your place, you don't know what you're doing. You got to have that. It's essential. It's essential to have the voice of the lived experience in your environment. Community variables impact relapse. Community resources are just as important as individual factors. We need to have resources in our community support recovery. And recovery can be initiated in artificial environments. You know what that means? Jail, hospital, and stuff like that. But it can only be really achieved in a natural environment. So a lot of times we think that what is treatment? Treatment is that thing that we do, but one of the phrases that I like to have coined myself was, learning to live in the community as a drug-free person. That's the real challenge. The real challenge is not stopping using. The real challenge is living every day without using, or without relapsing into my room, and being moaning about my loss. If we really believe addiction is a chronic disorder, and if we are all about chronic disorders, and we would not create the expectation that full recovery should always be achieved in a single treatment episode. We have to expect that people will not. And we got to be like primary care. When you go for when you got diabetes, and they tell you don't eat cake or ribs, because the salt is on there. Do you really think they think you are not going to eat some? They expect you to relapse. So they know that it's going to be very difficult for you to live every day and stick to your diet all the time. But we in our work, we kind of expect, that people don't fall back. We view prior treatments as indicators of that if you got treated more than once, you are a real hard nut to crack. Something is wrong with you, So all these things terminate service relationships after a brief intervention. The whole idea is that, and these are things that we've been doing, and we've got to modify these things. And this is what the new paradigm is about. It's not so much about being with the person in this treatment thing. It's about how do we sustain our relationship with them over time. And these funding mechanisms are important because they got to help pay us to do that, you know, which is not a bad thing. Recovery management is a philosophical framework for organizing addiction treatment, but it's not just addiction treatment, it's any chronic disorder treatment to provide pre-recovery identification and engagement, recovery initiation, stabilization, long-term recovery maintenance, and a quality of life enhancement for individuals and families. That really means that, helping somebody with a chronic disorder is not a time-limited thing. It's a time-unlimited thing. And so when they say we have an Office of Recovery-Oriented Systems of Care, what does that mean? It means it's going to give us the opportunity to work with people over a longer time. But it's an obligation on us to bring more things into the mix than just the psychological services. You see what I'm saying? We have to do what we kind of knew we were always supposed to do. So recovery-oriented systems of care support person-centered and self-directed approaches. The person's got to be the center. You know, it's got to be what they want, not what we want for them. Approaches to care that build on the strengths and resilience of individuals. Those are another key word, you know, strengths. We're not used to looking at the strengths of our people. Just like when I went to my first treatment episode, they told me everything bad about these folks. They are manipulative. They are liars. You know, I wouldn't have known there was a strength in the room, right? I wouldn't have known that there was a talent in the room, you know. But just say, you know, let's have a talent show. And you find out that you got talent in the room. Resilience of individuals, families, and communities to take responsibility for their sustained health, wellness, and recovery from. So these key words, sustained health, wellness, are things that we have to incorporate in our work now. And everybody's got a different definition, but the thing is, this is Michigan's definition. Now, Michigan's definition is important because in the contract, you know, we got to go back to the legal stuff. In the contract for the authority that is governing our work here in Wayne County, the legislation says that you will have a recovery-oriented system of care. So if you want to when your next contract comes up and you're going to write your proposal, you better say something about a recovery-oriented system of care or how you promoting recovery within the client base that you have. So Michigan's recovery-oriented system of care supports an individual's journey towards recovery and wellness. It's not about just treating them. By creating and sustaining networks of formal and informal services and supports. So we gotta somehow help create systems of support that support the person now. It's not just enough to treat them. We have to make sure that they get sustained health services. And these opportunities have to be established through collaboration, partnership, and a broad array of services to promote the life-enhancing recovery and wellness of the individuals. So what does that mean? You know, so sometimes it's hard to work through these statements, but we've got to work with job development. We've got to work with all the agencies that support that person in order to sustain their recovery. So it's not just about us anymore, you know, and we just can't say, well, I provide the treatment. The mental health and substance abuse recovery treatment services and there's going to be evaluations. Now, there's something you need to write down, especially if you're an agency and especially if you're in the management or administration of an agency, which is something called DD-CAT and DD DDCMH, which means dual diagnosis capable. So now that we're integrating and merging, your agencies have to be dual diagnosis capable. You know, it starts at your mission statement. And if your mission statement doesn't say you're working with people with mental health and substance abuse issues, you know, then you're not dual diagnosis capable. You know, and it runs down through the whole. So there's an instrument, there's a toolkit on the web, on the internet, put out by SAMHSA, and it's called the DDCAT. And the AT means for dual diagnosis capable for addiction treatment, and there's DDC for MH, which is dual diagnosis capable for mental health. And next year, the authority will be coming to your locations and scoring you on your dual diagnosis capable services. You know, we don't want to be an addiction-only treatment center anymore. We don't want to be a mental health-only treatment center anymore. You know, and so we're going to have to learn to, that you're going to be evaluated on, you know, are you providing these two services by the same team, at the same location, in the same place? You know, we don't need to send people all over. And with the Affordable Care Act, and I know I'm getting, it's getting going to be even more, because right now in Lansing, they're working on the legal framework for making sure that you have to combine substance abuse, mental health, and primary care at the same agency for your client. So if you don't have it at your agency, you need to have a MOU or a cooperative agreement with somebody that they're going to do it. Do you see what I'm saying? So everybody's going to be jumping in the next year to figure out how they're going to work this. Now to play the mental health providers, they got to figure out how they're going to get primary care and substance abuse in their mental health. Addiction people, they got to figure out how, because you can't send everybody everywhere. You got to have a team. And that team has got to be working for the whole of the client. Recovery targets the individual's needs, the individual needs of people with co-occurring disorders, and is integrated on organizational and clinical levels. And I want to run through this pretty quick because I do want to show you a video too. Because the whole issue of integrated services is like going to be the last place that I'm going to kind of go with you. And then we're going to kind of do some questions. But this whole idea, can everybody say ROSC? ROSC, recovery-oriented system of care. Come on. Recovery-oriented systems of care. It's something that you got to know. And it's a good thing for our clients. So what are the values of this ROSC, of this recovery-oriented system of care? I mean, we talked about person-centered care a long time, but it places the individual at the center of the services and supports. It recognizes that there are many pathways to recovery from any of these disorders, and it's not, and we have to kind of respect that. A lot of times in our formal treatment system, we don't want to hear nothing about AA, put them in the basement. NA, you know, if they don't do it our way, it's the wrong A. You know, so, you know, they got to do, you know, they need therapy. You know, now after they get therapy, they can go to this meeting, you know, but people recover differently. You know, there was one lady that told me her recovery story, and she was out in the street, midnight. It was started pouring, and she heard this music, and she went in this church and sat in the back to get dry. Something happened in that church, in that back row. And she's been clean and sober ever since, more than 5 years, the rest of her life. Not only that, she is working. I don't understand it. I don't know that I can do that in a therapy session. So I have to know my limitations too, right? I wish I could, but I cherish traveling that road with her. So our job a lot of times as helpers is traveling that road with people and respecting the way they want to do it. Some people are going to want to do it through their faith or religious experience. Some people are going to want to do it through AA or NA, but they still need us to do help them with this whole recovery-oriented system of care. So it's got to be self-directed. The individual is encouraged and assisted in exercising the greatest level of choice and responsibility of which he or she is capable. Big problem that we have, especially in the mental health side. We really feel like we're caretakers and we have to manage somebody's life. So many times people will say, I'm not a case to be managed. And if we think about that, as case managers, many of us are case managers, but people sometimes, feel like they're not a case to be managed. They're a person with wants and needs, and they want you to help them with that, not manage their case. Strength-based. We have to start looking at what is the strength of our clients. My grandma used to say, God gave everybody a talent, son. Your job is just to find what your talent is. I don't know, some of them old wisdoms might be right. But our clients have talents. And we need to work on their talents. Participation of family members and caregivers and significant others and friends in the community. This is the hardest one. And I've been doing this work for a while. And at the agency, Detroit Recovery Project, where I'm working now, the hardest part that we're dealing with is involving families, from my perspective. Involving families. And it's critical. It's not an easy thing because sometimes families are part of the problem. I started using with daddy. I started using with my brother, my cousin. We have mental health issues that, are family issues. I've actually seen kids that were raised up in a family with mom and dad were schizophrenic. And you treat the kid, I don't know if you've had the experience, but the kid is schizophrenic until they're not in the house. So the kid never was schizophrenic. They just learned to act schizophrenic because that's the way the house was. So, it's amazing that we have to look at the strength of the person. We have to look at the family, and we have to treat many times the whole family. So, but these are what a recovery-oriented system of care is. So when you go back and you look at the slide, you got to look at, well, what are we going to have to do new in this new environment? If we want our contract to be continued, we have to have real alliances with supporting networks in our community. I talk about because one of the biggest ones in the community that I'm serving is this whole unemployment thing. It's really hard to have self-esteem when you don't have a job. They say, well, I am my job, right? Dr. Trent, psychologist. If I didn't have that, who would I be? Just another old guy up here. That you wouldn't be getting credits for listening to. Okay, but how much we have? Let's see. Are we going to want to do a question and answer? You think we should save a half hour for that or not? Not. Nah. Okay, maybe. But I want to just briefly hit on this because this recovery-oriented system of care piece didn't just come along. It's been going on for about 10 years, and we have, and like I say, the person who really kind of started this movement within the government was my good old friend George Bush. I love me some George Bush. But he was the first one to say we need some recovery recovery-oriented services. We need recovery-oriented services, not treatment-oriented services. And not to say that treatment is not good, but after treatment, what happens? You know, is there anything about this recovery thing? Or is that just somebody's? So he set up grants where we could do, and that was to fund recovery-oriented services. And we actually, the organization I'm working with now, Detroit Recovery Project, is the child of one of those organizations. They don't really, their primary mission is not to do treatment, but to be working with people after treatment to help them sustain for at least 5 or 6 years the progress they made in their treatment experience. And to be, you know, the idea is that when people had recovery support services, that there was a lot of positives going on with their substance abuse issues. That, you know, that there was a big increase in the number of people who had sustained their recovery after 6 months. That there was a big increase in the number of people who were employed. That the number of people who were now housed. Housing is a big one. Your agency got to be helping people get housing. Not housing you kick them out of because they're not using. What happened? Where did that come from? Okay. Increase in not being arrested again. And a big increase in being socially connected. Also, the outcomes for these agencies were also on the mental health side. That people who had sustained recovery support services, you know, experienced less depression, less severe anxiety, experienced less hallucinations, probably because they were taking their medication. You know, medication is a good thing. You know, but it's not good for everybody. And it's not good for people that don't want it. You know, because it's patient-centered. You know, sometimes our main goal is make sure the person's taking their medication. Well, did we ask the person, do they want to take their medication? You know, and so maybe we need to work on that issue. Experience trouble understanding, but all these positive things have been happening. So sustained recovery support services works, and that's for the reason it's in the legislation now. Because folks want to save money. And when people have these positive outcomes, they don't go back to treatment. They don't have to sit in the treatment center and eat, and they're not in the crisis center, you know, which is very, very expensive. Examples of recovery support services that we need to be providing to people. Employment and training services. These is a list of things that, what are you not doing at your agency? Think about doing them. Case management, because when your contract comes, it's going to ask you, how are you going to do employment services? Relapse prevention, housing assistance and services, child care, patient education and child development. Our agency just got a grant from HUD. We got, you know, and another one from the correction system. You know, we can't afford to have all these people in jail. That's $35,000 a year. You know, they can pay us a lot less if we can keep them from criminal behavior. Patient education, transportation to and from treatment. Are you providing that? You know that communication and transportation are two of the biggest problems for our clients? You can't get nowhere and you can't call nobody. What kind of life have you got? That's called a mental health issue. That's stress, right? Like they got a job on the other side of town. I don't have a bus ticket. It's here. Like my president says, it's already happening. It happened October the 1st. You know, so are you integrated care capable yourself? You know, and what does it mean? Is it valuable? Evidence-based. Is the work you're doing evidence-based? You know, sometimes, you know, we do what we think, and I sometimes have experience, but it has to be evidence-based. And that means that it's a proven package that works. Cognitive behavioral therapy, motivational interviewing, skills. These are things you got to have. You know, we have to be dealing with people where they're at. It's called stage-oriented treatment and care. Remember we had those boxes? You know, if a person's and we just engaged them in the street and they're using it, you know, we have to treat them in a different way than the person that went to treatment and they've been clean for 3 months. You know, it's not the same service for everybody. It's got to be a service delivered for the person. Gender and specific, gender specific. We need services for women. We need services for men. We don't need homophobic services. What I saw in the paper the other day, Michigan is getting ready for same-sex marriage. You're going to have to do marriage. Does anybody do marriage or family therapy anymore? Family therapy? Think about getting some training about family therapy. Family dynamics. It's going to be really, really important. Trauma-informed care. Everything has to be trauma-informed. When people walk in your door, they have to know that this is not a traumatic environment. You know, the pictures you have on the wall, you know, don't need to be red with transformers on them. You know, I mean, we need, you know, welcoming. You know, we don't need the receptionist, you know, putting you through a traumatic experience at the door because she had a bad day or he had a bad day. That's trauma for somebody coming to your location for the first time, right? They need a welcoming environment where they feel family-focused, like I say, which is really difficult, and appropriate to the person's stage of life and stage of recovery. And culturally responsive. So how is this different, and where is the manual for us to do this? Well, a part of the manual, then this is the exciting part for everybody, especially for me, especially the young people. I mean, you know, you're born in a place where dynamic change is going to be happening in the next few years on how we serve people. And the same way I had an instinct when I went to Battle Creek Veterans Hospital and went in treatment, that something is wrong here. Something is wrong here. People don't need to be treated like this. That was my feeling. You know, now they said, well, you work here, you got to do it our way. I did it their way. But in my gut, I knew something was wrong. Have you had that feeling before? In your services, at your place? You know, I mean, now somehow the opportunity has come to change that. And one of the big things is the voice of your clients is finally being heard, too. You know, and your voice and the voice of people who have experienced these issues in life is being heard. And so what we need to do is listen and get ready for what it is. So this is where a good point. This, you know, one of the things I love is that computer. I love me some YouTube. Have you discovered YouTube? You know, there's a YouTube for everything out there. And there's nothing like hearing from real people. And this video here is about the benefits of integrated care from the viewpoint of individuals that need the service. Okay? So watch this for a few minutes. We'll talk about it and then we'll end. Is there anything better than the lived experience of people themselves in their struggles? You'll see that in the presentation that you have, there's a whole nother section on the Affordable Care Act. And I really wanted to include it, even though I know that we wouldn't have time to do all of it. But it is so important for us and the people we serve that we have the resources to be able to help them. So maybe the resources will be taken care of, but then we've got to have the skill and the humility to be able to help the people live their life. And when I say humility, that means that what's really important in our relationship with them is what they want, you know, and to be able to see, you know, the miracle of recovery, be able to really believe that there's hope. And, you know, sometimes that's kind of hard. I was like, somebody was saying to me, you know, in treatment, in therapy, you know, it's like, you know, I've got a mental health issue and I got a substance abuse issue too. And they're both chronic. I mean, you know, what worse could happen to me? You know, what have I got to be happy about? You know, and there is hope. And well, you know, with those squares, you know, with the less severe and the severe and the something, you know, a lot of us around here, regular people, are in that little box where we have mild substance abuse and mild mental health. You know, so we're in one of them boxes too. You know, so it's a beautiful thing. Because you're here, I love you because I know that there are no greater people in the world than the people who are in this room and the people who listen to this presentation, because you chose to be in this profession. You know, and I think it's, you need to be applauded, and we want to make sure that, I want to make sure that this new paradigm opens in a way that you'll be able to do the work that you do, the best that you do, and earn a good living doing it. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with helping and living. Thank you so much. We got about 15 or 20 minutes. We can take some questions or some experiences. Don't have to be questions. What about Derek? Oh, you know, wasn't that kid, the kid who's, you know, how many kids did we see that went to prison when he was 17? He's 34. Celebrating his 34th birthday out of prison for the first time with a mental health and a substance abuse issue. You know, it's amazing.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Thank you, Dr. Trent. I've collected a couple here, and I do want to
Okay.
remind people to please follow the link to the electronic survey after today's presentation. And thank you again for bearing with us through our technical issues today. So the first person asks, she's working with two people who have intellectual disabilities and mental illness, and also smoke marijuana on a regular basis. And she was wondering what suggestions you have in particular for working with them.
Okay. Well, you know, one of the first suggestions I have in terms of working with anybody is to find out where they're at, you know, and begin to have a conversation with them about what they want, what their goals are, and then begin to formulate work around their goal. Their goal may not be, you know, as a matter of fact, I have one wonderful client. These are some of my folks here that I work with. And Barney, raise your hand, Barney. Barney's got one guy that we love this guy. His name is Brother Bay. It's not really his real name. But he came to us and he says, well, I need help with transportation. I need to get places. And I smoke weed, and the only thing you can do about my weed smoking is help me get some more weed. Because I am not interested in not smoking weed. Okay? Now, you know, in the old paradigm, we would be like, okay, we can't do nothing for you, Brother Bay. You know, when that weed is finally going to get you and you're going to hit rock bottom. But now, we've been helping him with his bus ticket. We helped him with his bus ticket. In fact, did we get him a bus card? No, we didn't get him a bus card. We got him transportation. And then guess what? He decided to go to his mental health, to get evaluated for mental health services. And he got evaluated for mental health services. And that was a struggle too, you know, but he did it. And so you got to work with the people where they're at. You know, so our preconceived notions, and one of the crazy stories, not crazy, but this is really amazing thought that came up in one of our integrated treatments. Brother Bay, is we have a relationship with an organization in Detroit called Team Mental Health. So we are doing an integrated service with them where we have case conference. The person has substance abuse and mental health disorder, and we work together as two agencies. And we case conference those people with the physical health care. So we have the nurse in the room, the psychiatrist in there, and we talk about this client, you know, and what's best for them. And one of the clinicians, one of the caseworkers said, well, why don't we get Mr. Bay medical marijuana? I'm like, my brain went, phew. I mean, come on, this is not what we do, you know. But in a sense, is this where our world is going? You know, other people got medical marijuana, right? Medical, people are giving out medical marijuana. So I don't know where we're going. But, you know, for Mr. Bay, stopping smoking marijuana was not his thing. The only thing we need to do for him is get him some more marijuana and a bus ticket. Now he wants mental health services. So I don't know where this is going, but I know Mr. Bay is much happier. And I know his kids are happier. We ain't got him no marijuana yet, but somebody was telling me, well, okay, if it's legal, could we help him with a medical marijuana card? I don't know. World is changing, isn't it? Next question. Did that help at all? You know, recognize where your people are and don't judge.
Okay, our next question is, so much attention is given to suicidal ideation, and rightly so, but what about homicidal ideation? What hotlines, screeners, et cetera, are available?
You know, that is, you know, a excellent question. I don't know about the hotline, but I know about both suicide and homicide. For people in our profession, I think one of the most important concepts is believe what your people tell you. I mean, can we say that? You know, my preacher always says that. I love to say that. Can you say that? Believe what your client tells you. You know, and you know, when I was early in my therapeutic work, I was often reprocessing what people told me. You know, and we, you know, as people, we do this. You know, little Jimmy says, well, I'm gonna go kick his butt. No, well, you know, you're not gonna do that. Turn around, fooled and went and did it. You know, I'm gonna kill my wife, sick of her. You know, oh, he's just talking. You know, people don't just talk. If a person has got to the place where they verbalize a destructive behavior, you have to take it seriously. Even in jest, even any way. If a person is in your office, in your location, in your family, and has got to the point of past thinking it, to verbalizing it to you, you know, if you don't take it seriously, you need to be liable. You know, so as therapists, we can blame, we can forgive mom for not believing it. But nobody can forgive us for not believing it. When your client tells you something, you believe it and you act on it. So that's very, very, very important. Don't reprocess and minimize what people tell you. So if somebody verbalizes suicidal thoughts or suicidal plans particularly, or homicidal plans, then you have to take it very seriously and report it, and not just refer them to a hotline.
Thank you.
But there should be a hotline. And actually, does anybody know a hotline for suicide? I know we should. I should have that. But I know that there is, so we got to find out.
Our next question
Crisis center. The crisis center is important. Yes, sir.
Okay. Our next question is, in your opinion, do funding sources understand the treatment process as it relates to cost?
Actually, I think that I'm really positively enthusiastic about what's going on right now, because I think that there is coming a day when we will get there will be funds for people. And the question, I think for the country is it worth spending the money? Sometimes I ride around, I think, the people who are not for people getting expanded Medicaid, and all the time, everything doesn't work, and you may spend money and people are back in the same situation, but is that a reason not for us to support funding for the people that do succeed? Because when you throw out the bathwater, you throw out the baby too, so you throw out the Derricks and the young lady, and these other people who have a right to a quality of life. So I don't know. I think that these the new things, the recovery-oriented system of care, which basically says we're going to pay for more than just treatment. You see, so recovery-oriented system of care, that the positive side is we were paying for treatment, but now we're going to pay for you to do other things. There's going to be a way for you to help people with transportation. There's going to be a way for you to help people with housing. There's going to be a way for you to help people with employment. So I don't think they understand, and I think we're in a time of very little compassion, but I do think that that we are having more opportunity, and it seems like more opportunity in the future will be there for improved funding. So I think that, right now you got a lot of opportunity for expanded services. If you're doing mental health, you can integrate substance abuse in there, and I think that it'll be easier to get paid for it.
All right. Our final question is, in your opinion, why are some states upset at Medicaid expansion?
I think it is, the idea of we don't have the money, and I think that we got to be realistic in our home budgets too. Sometimes we don't have the money, and I don't know. I mean, the easiest way to solve the problem of the people with mental disorders and all that, not easy, and it's cynical what I'm going to say, and it's cruel what I'm going to say, but Hitler just said, let's kill them. We're not for that, but we're for not serving them, which is the same thing. You know what I mean? So I don't know where we are as a nation and as a people in terms of if it costs me to help somebody, is that something I'm willing to go for? Is it going to increase my property taxes or something like that? And that's what, when we talked about, I showed that chart about health care being the social determinants of health. So so part of the social determinant of health is people's attitude, and their willingness to pay. And that's another thing that I think that we as a profession and as an industry, and we have an industry here, have to be aware of, and be advocates for. A lot of times people with dual diagnosed mental health issues cannot be advocates as much for themselves. But there's got to be advocacy. You know, the people who are advocating for less government are advocating for less government, which means people won't get the help. You know, which I'm not saying that's bad or good. It's not a political statement. I'm just saying but they're advocates. You know, so there has to be other advocates. So if you advocate for people to get more help, then that's a good thing. And our industry really needs advocacy. You know, there's not a lot of people running around saying, well, let's help that crackhead down the street. You know, it's just that's not happening. You know, or let's help that guy get a job. You know, I mean, my mom told me, the man that don't work don't eat. Simple as that. You know, so we have to evaluate our values, and I think that's what we're going through. So I don't know where it's going, but you know, I'm a crazy liberal. So I hate when I'm driving down the street and I see the homeless person pulling stuff out the garbage can. I'm like, that was somebody's pretty baby. That could be my grandson, you know, and I like the feeling that I do have a heart that way. So, but everybody doesn't.
Well, Dr. Trent, on behalf of the Detroit-Wayne County Mental Health Authority, we want to thank you so very much for your
Thank you for
expertise
having
today.
me.